George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. Well, it's Labor Day weekend, so we thought what better than to have an author to talk about work. How do you find you're happy at work, especially since we're still in a pandemic? Yeah, we're trying to get out of this pandemic, but right now we're still into one. And so people are making decisions all across the country about their lives, whether they want to go to work, whether they want to stay at the job that they have. And if they're going to stay at the job that they have, how do they find their happy? Well, Find Your Happy at Work is the name of Beverly Green's book, and she's here. Beverly Jones. I don't know why I said Green. Beverly Jones. Beverly Jones. Show me that book, Beverly. Show it up. Show it up. Show it up. There it is. Beverly Jones, Find Your Happy at Work. And she's here to help us to do just that. Let me start with what's happening with people at work right now. People are making choices about whether they want to do the thing that they were doing, and why. And COVID exacerbated all of that. What is your experience, and what are you seeing?
It's amazing, the transition that it feels like the whole country is going. And on the upside, I think we all have a better, well, most of us have a better appreciation for all the kind of jobs we depend on, whether people are in the hospital or driving a truck. We understand that what work contributes to the community is really important, but we've also found that life is short and we want to have as much meaningful, happy time as we can. And we don't want to just waste it on a job that doesn't suit us. So I think what people are doing is a lot of rethinking. And in a way, there's so many opportunities now that there's a match between the people who want to try something new and some of the trends that are happening in the workplace. One of them is so many new things were accelerated because of COVID. And that is, of course, all this remote activity. And also many, many new skills became in demand because of the digitization of everything. Employers are understanding that they need to hire new kinds of people, or rather people with new kinds of skills. And they're starting to take responsibility for what they're calling upskilling. They're working with universities to create courses that you can take from home without leaving your house, to create the kind of skills that you're going to need in some of the jobs you're going to go to. So there's some tremendous trends in terms of opportunities to upskill, to get new skills. There are opportunities to work remotely more than we ever expected. We don't know how that's going to work out. But also there's an understanding that people have a right to a meaningful, joyful career. And employers, I think, are starting to acknowledge that they have to think about the well-being of their staff, or they're not going to keep them for very long. There's a real sense that people need to be taken care of.
Yeah, you mentioned, and by the way, the subtitle 50 Ways to Get Unstuck, Move Past Boredom, and Discover Fulfillment. And this idea of boredom, because it used to be, right, back in the day, we just slogged it out and we just did what we had to do to keep the food on the table. Is this a generational shift? How much do you think this has to do with the type of young person that we have today, or the economy the way it is today? People just, in order to grow in your career, you sort of patchwork. You chart your own course, 4 years here, 3 years here, 2 years there, 6 months here, right? People are just moving around.
Well, it's partly generational, it's partly a culture shift, but it's also partly that psychology has come a long way and we understand things like boredom and so forth. I think one view of what boredom is, I think it's akin to thirst. When you feel thirsty, that's sort of a cue to yourself. We've evolved with this to go get a drink. Well, we have evolved as human beings with another cue, and that is when you feel bored, that's a cue to do something different. And we used to think that we had to ignore that and just keep doing the same thing, and it got worse and worse. There's some things that you can do different, that you have to negotiate with your boss, or there are limits. But the fact of the matter is, every one of us every day can make some changes to make it different. We can change our attitude. We can turn something tedious into a game. We can take a break, and We can vary how we do the work. We can improve the processes. So we have the fun of doing things better. So action is the secret response to boredom if you really want to not get sucked down to a negative cycle.
What's interesting, Beverly, is that you have in your book I mean, you basically, I don't want to just say it this way, but it is that you basically saying, let's make a game out of it, right? I mean, you essentially are telling us to make a game out of it to add some of that zest and excitement in some things that may be mundane. Because I'm thinking about like in part of the work that I do, it's in trauma response, responding to victims of gender-based violence, right? So in that work, you have I'm on the prevention side. I'm trying to get you not to do it, but then we have other people in our space who are receiving that call from someone who is in a stressful situation, and then trying to negotiate that. And so, for some people, it's constant, right?
Yeah.
So how do you find the happy in spaces where you're on the receiving end of other people's trauma, medical professions, I'm thinking police, law enforcement, other professions like that. How do you find you're happy in spaces like that?
I kind of summarize it with what I call the engagement triangle.
Okay.
There are three things that all the research and all my experience suggests we have to manage if we want to be happy at work. One of those is sort of processes and production, and that's where you gamify it. Sometimes
Mhm.
you want to change how you do it and so forth. But the other two things really matter too. One of them is purpose.
Yeah.
Keep your focus on why you're doing it. It might be if you're dealing with trauma, it's because you care deeply. You
Hmm.
care about the situation. It might be your purpose is putting yourself through school. I mean, but keep track of what your purpose is and keep reminding yourself or questioning how it's aligned with the purpose of the task and the purpose of the organization. And the other one is the people. At any kind of um, difficult situation, there are probably other people who are stakeholders. Some of those are people who can help you. Those are people you can get support from. And some of those are people you focus on because you know it's all about helping them. So if you think about the processes and how you can shift things up to make it more fun, if you keep asking yourself, who's impacted? Who are the stakeholders? And how can I connect with them? And then purpose, that can kind of get you out of almost any situation, gives you a starting point anyway to analyze where you are.
Well, Beverly, I think about you have lots of tips. Again, you talk about writing, you talk about relationship at work. I'm interested in why this was important to you right now.
Well, I've had a number of different careers myself, but in recent years, I've been an executive coach and I've watched my clients and lots of other people being unhappy when they didn't need to. I've had clients who I think are fabulous and they're hardworking, but they're anxious. Their lives are out of balance. They don't have time for their families. I think I've seen so much unhappiness, and so much of the answer in the cases that I see so regularly starts with the person. It starts with managing yourself. That I wanted to say, look, there's lots and lots of evidence that people who are happy are more successful. So being successful is not an excuse for taking care of your happiness. And there are lots of ways that you can look at your situation and make things better. It starts with your willingness to be positive about it and take responsibility to try some things.
You know, uh, let's talk about responsibility because I would suspect that part of our responsibility is to schedule the fun time in our day in order for there to be some fun. Talk to me, Beverly.
Yes, yes. I tell my clients, and sometimes I tell them clients are supposed to not be directive, but sometimes I am. But I say you got to schedule it. You got to schedule time for yourself, just like you would important meetings, because it's taking those breaks. It's doing things you enjoy that spark your creativity, that give you new ideas, that help you make connections, that broaden your network. I would put it on your calendar if you're not good about doing it. I'd put a little break. I'd put time off that's more significant and treat it with the same seriousness that you treat the rest of your work, because this is part of what you have to do in order to be fit to do your best work. You
Yeah,
have
no,
to have fun.
yeah. I think the Zoom environment, the virtual environment, has tricked us into thinking that we have to go from one thing to another. I mean, I look at my day today. I started at 8 and, one back to back to back. And the research suggests that you
Mhm.
should have a break in between
You
those
should.
meetings, right? And
Absolutely.
right? And so, and but we think, oh, I've got this window, and I'll just and you haven't taken a breath, and it just feels like you're so much more tired after a virtual meeting. I don't know if that's in my head or if that's true or
No,
not.
you are. It's tiring for your brain. You have to kind of figure out what people are thinking in a way that you can easily do when you're in person, and you need to vary any activity.
Hmm.
We're not built to run marathons every day. We're
Right.
built in sprints with a little rest in between. And
Right.
when you get exhausted from being on a screen all day, the creative part of yourself shuts down. It really does.
And so when we think about how to find your happy at work, some of the ways that you talk about in the book, I'm interested in when you feel like you're in that rut, like from a creative standpoint, or if you got, like in our business, there's a lot of grant writing, there's a lot of coordinating with other people, but sometimes it feels like tedium. It's tedious. And sometimes it's you don't get the information that you need, and then you the people on the other end, the grantors, they're not satisfied, and you have to rewrites and things of that nature. In those moments, how do you find you're happy?
One of the things you can do, of course, is learn little techniques like taking a deep breath and just kind of mini breaks. So you can manage your response to the frustrating things. But when you're in a kind of a chronic situation, you don't know what to do. I, I think a simple thing to keep in mind is to learn something new.
Okay.
You are in a rut. Learning is a great way to get out of a rut. And that can be learning something that's not even related to your day job, but something that you find genuinely interesting. As soon as you sort of have that learning mode going, you're going to see things in your day job. You're going to see things in your regular work, and you're going to get new ideas about them. So if you're totally in a box, if you feel like totally stuck, learn something new.
But it also has to do with how you feel about yourself as well.
That's right. A lot of it is the inside part. A lot of it is the voice in your head. I spent a lot of time talking back to the voice in my head that would say things like, "You're going to flunk if you don't study, or you're never going to get a job, or they're never going to accept a woman." All of those things. I think one of the things you can do is treat yourself like you would a dear friend. Treat
Mhm.
yourself like somebody you love. Listen to the voice in your head and don't let it beat you up. And then take care of yourself physically. Take care of yourself and taking breaks. Um, Care for yourself the way you would a dear friend who you wanted to be able to perform well.
I love that. But at the same time, a lot of times at work, we think it's all about, well, we sometimes feel attacked about things. Sometimes we might take it personal. Some things, sometimes hard to separate the professional and the personal relationship, especially when it's around accountability. Walk me through that.
Well, one thing I want to say is that right now, probably most of the people you're working with, no matter who you are, what you're doing, they're stressed.
Hmm.
So when you're dealing with difficult people, when you're dealing in conflict situations, I mean, there are, of course, terrible situations that are off the chart, but for most of us, for those day-to-day kind of conflicts,
Hmm.
just remind yourself it's not about you. They have their stuff. When people treat you badly, it's very likely that they are struggling with something.
Hmm.
I think if you can take a deep breath, if you can center yourself in some way, if you can remind yourself that it's about them, it's not about you, and even feel some compassion, I think that's really feeling it in your heart. It's the inside,
Yeah.
being calm yourself, feeling a little compassion so you could look at them objectively and not beating yourself up or beating them up. That's a person who's struggling with something.
And you know, I'm thinking about just Beverly Jones. The name of the book is Find Your Happy at Work. I think that as I'm listening to, I'm thinking, okay, the one of the things about this virtual world is the work-life balance, right? Because you know, people who are entrepreneurs who work from their home, they've figured it out. But in this hybrid, going to the office, going to the home, how do you keep that work-life balance, or the balance of this is, I don't have to answer that email at 12 midnight. I can wait till the morning to do it.
Well, one of the things you do, we can get back to two things I already talked about. One of them is talking back to that voice in your head that lies and tells you it's important to answer at 2 in the morning. I mean, you fight with your unreasonable tendencies.
Right.
So you take care of the voice in your head, but you also go back to what I was saying about scheduling, and I mean it. You schedule your bedtime.
Mm.
You schedule the time you're going to spend with your family. You schedule the time you're going to exercise. You have just one life. You don't have like work, it's this big, and then your life is here. You got one life. You carve out spots for work, and you carve out spots for all the things that make you productive and happy. If you take care of yourself and take care of your happiness, you're going to be more successful than if you work day and night and get exhausted.
All right, Beverly, before we go, I want to go back to motivation, right? Because that's part of the getting unstuck.
Yeah.
So let's talk about moving through to get things done when you're not motivated to do it.
Though the quick answer is, which is what we need, the quick answer is to act. Sometimes just getting started, taking a little step. Motivation tends to follow action. You take a little step, you feel better about it, it's not so bad, and then you're motivated again. So when you don't know what to do, just act, do a little something, and that will help you motivation come back.
Find your happy at work. 50 ways, not 49, but 50 ways to get unstuck, move past boredom, and discover fulfillment. But Beverly Jones, Beverly E. Jones, I don't want to not give you your E credit. Beverly E. Jones, the author. Find the book everywhere, Amazon, any other things you want us to know before we go Beverly E. Jones about what we should do to get unstuck, move past boredom, and discover fulfillment. Give us something to do right now. Like give us a take with for Labor Day. This is what you're going to do starting Tuesday. Yes.
Talk to yourself right now like you would to a dear friend, and talk to them about the need for taking holidays seriously and doing something that's enjoyable this weekend.
All right. Enough said. Beverly E. Jones, thank you so much. Find your happy at work. 50 ways to get unstuck, move past boredom, and discover fulfillment. Beverly E. Jones, thank you so much for being an inspiration for the nation. And take her advice. Enjoy yourself this weekend. Get the book and find your happy at work. Inspiration for the nation.
Thank you.